Our guest in studio is Lieutenant Colonel and Congressman Allen West from the 22nd Congressional District in Florida. You won a district. Ron Klein was the guy you beat. You won a district that is, by all accounts, the consultants would tell you is a Democrat district. How did you win that seat?
Well, I think it's important that you stick to principles. We did not make it an issue of Republican versus Democrat. We made it an issue of principles and governance and, what my philosophy would be and the stances that I would take. And when you talk about the government and what it responsible roles for it as far as the Constitution. You talk about fiscal responsibility. You talk about restoring a sense of individual responsibility and accountability, our free market and the private sector growth, and traditional values and our national security. So when you stick to those basic 5 points, it's going to resonate with people. There are always going to be folks that aren't going to like it, but it's a D+1 district. We're going through redistricting right now. It'll probably get a little stronger to an R2, R3, and we'll just continue to stay on that message.
You mentioned that district. The National Journal's Cook Political Report named you as one of the 10 Republicans most vulnerable to redistricting in 2012. We use the term vulnerable because that's what the president and Sheila Jackson Lee like to refer to as people that can't live without government. I don't think of you as a vulnerable.
No,
but
I'm
you
not
are vulnerable
No.
to political redistricting. Does that worry you?
No, and I don't see myself as being vulnerable. I know one thing for certain is that I'm the number one target for the DCCC. And obviously, that's not a person that's vulnerable. That's a person that's being very effective. And so that's why.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think they need to
Well, I think it's
you?
important because the message and my voice is resonating all across the country. And it is about, being bold and standing up for those American principles. And the other side, liberals are just not used to conservatives that are going to go toe-to-toe with them and fight back. As a matter of fact, when you go out, one of the big, things that people say about Republicans is that they get too weak-kneed. And they're always the first ones to try to, mediate and negotiate and compromise. Well, you think about in the years when, Barack Obama was president, Nancy Pelosi was speaker, Harry Reid was Senate Majority Leader, you never heard anyone in the news media or anyone talk about compromise. But then all of a sudden they lose the House, and then everything is about, well, you need to compromise. You need to reach across the aisle. You need to, and I think it's important that we stand upon the right principles and challenge them. Show us that what you believe in is better. And to this point, when you look at the statistics, it's not better.
Do you think, well, I'll come back to that question. I want to go back to your military career.
Mm-hmm.
You rose through the ranks. You won all sorts of awards. I looked. I can't find an award you didn't win. The Bronze Star, the Meritorious Service.
Well, there's, Silver Star.
There are a few you didn't
yeah.
win. But you have a meritorious career serving our country.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you left has been widely discussed.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to have no regrets. You're very proud of your service. Tell us what happened in Taji, Iraq.
Well, the bottom line is this. I made a decision to use a psychological intimidation tactic to get a guy to come forth with the information that make sure that my soldiers under my command stayed alive, because we had seen an uptick in roadside ambushes and things of that nature. We got a tip that there was an Iraqi police officer that was kind of funneling our routes and some meeting locations over to the bad guys at that time, Saddam Fedayeen. We were able to pick him up, bring him in. He was not forthcoming with any information and really was kind of making a mockery of our, dedicated and assigned intel specialists. And so I took it upon myself, because I am the one that's ultimately responsible for the safety and the lives of those men. And so I went down and I, told him that I was going to, take him out and kill him if he didn't give us the information we needed. He continued to stonewall me, so we took him out. I shot my 9mm across the backside of his head into a weapons clearing barrel, and he came forth with the right information. And I turned myself in, and that was the rest of it.
In several reports during the course of you beginning to interrogate him or having some concerns over him, I guess
Mm-hmm.
he was a Iraqi civilian officer,
Mm-hmm.
there was several people have reported that he made a move toward a gun, that he made a menacing gesture that would suggest
that
there
was
a
when
threat
they
to you.
were that was when they were picking him up down at
Okay.
the police station. That was not in my interaction with him. No,
Do you regret that incident?
absolutely not. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why I don't regret that incident, because the men who were in that unit still call me. and still thank me. And sometimes their family members still thank me. As a matter of fact, there's a great young man who was my driver in that unit, Robert Delgado. He lives here in Houston, Texas, and he and I have had a great relationship continuing on past my time in the military. As I said, my most important responsibility is to the safety and the lives of my men, because when you have that final pre-deployment briefing before you're going to head away, and those wives, the family members, mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers come from all over to see their loved ones for the last time. There's only one thing that they expect out of a commander of those men and women. You're going to be the one that does everything possible to bring them back home to us safely. And for me, sacrificing my career for that, I have no regrets.
Have you used psychological intimidation tactics on me since we began this interview?
Yeah, I'm staring you down.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
I was wondering about that. The way you were treated, which has been widely reported, a number of men in wearing the uniform have suggested it was inappropriate. You had 95 members of Congress sign off on a letter of commendation about you, suggesting you were unfairly treated. This issue rose to the level of a major political hot potato. If that happened to you, it could happen to anyone. Does that mean our men wearing the uniform are less safe because of the way we are engaging?
Well, it has happened to other individuals. You've got Roger Hill, who pretty much so did the same thing that I did, except he shot into the ground in Afghanistan. You have Lieutenant Michael Behenna, who is serving a sentence, 20-year sentence, I believe, at Fort Leavenworth, because he killed a known al-Qaeda terrorist, al-Mansour. So, if we don't have people in Washington, D.C., that have been on the tactical level of this battlefield, that understand what our men and women face, we're going to have the same type of wrong, political correct decisions that are being made, especially with the rules of engagement. Look, we just lost a CIA officer in Afghanistan, and this is a consistent event where you have individuals that are in the Afghan National Army or police uniforms that are turning their weapons on our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. And we have to have people that understand that, and we have to have the right type of processes and procedures in place that protect our men and women.
Lieutenant Colonel Congressman Allen West is our guest. Terry in Lahaina writes, if able, please ask Congressman West if there's anything that can be done about the so-called Leavenworth 10. He's aware of the plight of these men, and you've spoken out on that.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think one of the key things that we have to try to do, and I sit on the Armed Services Committee, is to get the issue of the rules of engagement and get the issue of the military legal system on the 21st century battlefield before the Armed Services Committee. And we need to bring light to some of the things that are happening so that we make sure that we're not unjustly prosecuting our warriors, that we make sure that we're giving them the right type of rules of engagement, giving them the right type of guidance and orders so they can go out and prosecute this battlefield. And I think that we have been somewhat failing in that. And so it's important that we can get that type of hearing, we can get those type of perspectives of individuals that have been on that battlefield. They take off the uniform, they put on a suit and tie, they continue serving their country, except for this time as a congressional representative.
Do you think we are doing right by our young soldiers that we send to Iraq and Afghanistan presently with the rules of engagement, the same rules of engagement that led to you resigning?
No, I think that we need to have a review of the rules of engagement, but the real thing we need to have a review of, we've got to get away from what I call nation-building occupation-style warfare. That does not lend itself to what our military is trained to do. When you look at what is happening, you just had, 2 weeks ago, the attack against the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. There will not be a secure Afghanistan until you contend with the enemy sanctuaries in Pakistan. And you just recently heard the Pakistani general say that they're not going to do anything to contend with the Haqqani terrorist network, which is now probably the strongest terrorist network operating out of Pakistan, superseding, the Taliban and al-Qaeda. So we have to have people that are willing to say, the enemy does not respect borders and boundaries, and therefore, if we're going to do the right thing to be successful on this battlefield, we have to not respect borders and boundaries. And when I hear this thing, war on terror, it's kind of a misnomer, because terror is a tactic. It would be just the same as in World War II, we went to war to fight the blitzkrieg or the kamikaze. We've got to understand this Islamic totalitarianism and the manifestation of it through the militant Islamic terrorism that we see on the battlefield. But at the strategic level, we have to look at the right type of goals and objectives that set the conditions for the success of our men and women on the battlefield. it's not just the Taliban. It's not just Al-Qaeda. It's the Haqqani Network, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, whomever.
Our guest is Lieutenant Colonel Congressman Allen West. He will be here with us for the rest of the hour. Stay tuned. You are listening to The Michael Berry Show. At this point, we lose all of our affiliates except for the folks in Houston, so I'll ask you this question. Our very own Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
Yeah, I know her well.
18th Congressional District.
And Al Green, too.
And Al Green and Gene Green. And, of course, Ted Poe, Kevin Brady, Michael McCall.
I know those good guys.
In the cloakroom, when nobody's around, Sheila Jackson Lee comes whizzing in some bright color. How's she perceived?
Well, it's not often that I get the chance to go into the Democrat cloakroom, and she doesn't come over to the Republican cloakroom too much. But, when you see her on the House floor, I will tell you this, though. When you sit and listen to her give some of those 30-minute or 1-hour soliloquies, I mean, she is a bright person. I just wish she would take that intellectual capacity and focus it towards some of the right principles and right perspectives. But she does have some pretty colorful outfits that I just kind of look at her some days and say, boy, I need to have some sunglasses on the House floor today.